used to believe the worst thing my family could do was underestimate me. But I learned otherwise the night my father announced at my cousin's lavish anniversary celebration that I was the only person in our family who had never managed to build a respectable life. And he said it with such confidence that several guests laughed before anyone even thought to question him. My name is Mara Bennett, and while everyone at that candlelit rooftop restaurant in Charleston, South Carolina, thought I was the quiet daughter who had bounced between ordinary jobs and never found her direction, I was carrying a secret so significant that revealing it would change not only how my family saw me, but also the future of the business they had spent years protecting. The evening had been carefully designed to display everything my parents valued. Expensive flowers lined the tables, a jazz trio played near the windows, champagne glasses glittered beneath hanging lights, and my older brother Daniel stood beside his wife receiving compliments as though the entire celebration had been organized around his success. My mother introduced him as the rising star of Bennett Properties. My father talked proudly about the company's newest developments, and whenever someone asked about me, my parents exchanged the same uncomfortable smile before saying, "Mara is still figuring things out," as though my entire life could be summarized in 6 careless words. I had heard that sentence so many times that it no longer hurt in the way it once had, especially after spending years watching my family measure worth by job titles, bank accounts, luxury cars, and photographs that looked impressive online, while never once asking why I had chosen a much quieter path. What they didn't know was that 3 years earlier I had left my comfortable corporate position, rented a tiny office above an old bookstore, and started building a property management technology company with 2 engineers and a laptop, pouring every spare dollar into software that could help small landlords manage maintenance, payments, tenants, and emergency repairs without paying enormous fees to traditional agencies. The business had grown slowly at first, almost painfully slowly, and there were months when I wondered whether I had made the biggest mistake of my life. But then independent property owners from different states began signing up, followed by regional housing groups, and eventually investors started asking for meetings after hearing about our unusual growth, without realizing the founder they were emailing was the same woman my family considered directionless. I deliberately kept my name away from public interviews because I wanted the company judged by its results rather than by my family connections. And I especially wanted to know whether I could succeed without anyone opening a door simply because my last name was Bennett. That was why I sat quietly through the first round of jokes that evening, even when my father raised his glass and told everyone that Daniel had inherited the business instincts of the family, while I had inherited a talent for changing plans every 6 months. Because arguing would have only turned the celebration into another debate about my life. Daniel laughed beside him and added, "Mara has always been independent," but the way he emphasized the word made it sound less like admiration and more like a warning, and my mother quickly changed the subject by describing the luxury condominium Daniel's company had recently purchased as an investment. Then a woman named Evelyn Hart arrived late, apologized to the table, and quietly took the empty chair beside me. And although everyone else immediately recognized her as a senior executive from a national housing investment group, I noticed something more important. She was holding a folder with the logo of my company printed across the front. My stomach tightened because I had never met Evelyn personally, yet I knew exactly why she was there. And when my father proudly began explaining that Daniel's firm was preparing a major technology partnership, Evelyn looked across the table at me with a puzzled expression that suggested she had just discovered something nobody had told her. My father continued speaking, unaware of what was happening, and announced that Daniel's company was considering purchasing a smaller technology firm that would modernize its property operations, while Daniel confidently described the software as a promising little platform that would eventually become part of Bennett Properties. I nearly smiled because I knew the platform he was describing, knew the acquisition rumors that had been circulating, and knew that the company he thought he was about to purchase had already received 3 competing offers, including one from an international investment group that valued it at more than his family's entire regional portfolio. Evelyn finally leaned toward me and whispered, "I'm sorry, but can I ask you something strange?" I nodded, and she lowered her voice further before asking, "Are you Mara Bennett, the founder of Northstar Property Systems?" The question seemed harmless, but when I quietly answered yes, her expression changed completely, because she had spent the previous 6 months trying to arrange a meeting with Northstar's founder and had been told that the founder preferred to remain anonymous until the company completed its next funding round. For several seconds, nobody at the table understood what had happened, and then Evelyn looked toward my father and said, "You know your daughter built the platform your company has been trying to acquire, right?" The laughter disappeared instantly. Daniel stopped smiling. My mother's hand froze above her plate, and my father stared at me as though he were seeing a stranger sitting in the chair where his supposedly unsuccessful daughter had been sitting all evening. Daniel recovered first and insisted there had to be some misunderstanding, claiming that Northstar was probably just a small startup whose founder shared my name. But Evelyn opened the folder and placed several documents on the table, including an investor presentation, a growth report, and a photograph from a recent technology conference that showed me standing on stage beside my engineering team. My father picked up the photograph with trembling fingers, and I watched the pride drain from his face as he realized that the woman he had spent years describing as unsuccessful had quietly built a company serving thousands of property owners across the country. Nobody apologized immediately, and strangely, I wasn't waiting for an apology anymore, because the moment I had imagined for years wasn't as satisfying as I thought it would be. There was no dramatic speech, no triumphant shouting, and no desire to humiliate them in return, only the strange realization that I had spent far too much energy trying to convince people of my worth when the life I had built had already answered every question they refused to ask. I told my father calmly that I had never hidden my work to punish the family, but because I needed to know that anything I achieved belonged entirely to me, and I wanted to build something that couldn't be dismissed as another Bennett family advantage. The next morning, my phone was filled with messages, some apologetic, some defensive, and some awkwardly congratulatory. But I didn't respond immediately because for the first time I wasn't desperate to repair the image my family had created of me. Daniel eventually called and admitted that the acquisition he had been planning would have made him look brilliant at work. And although his voice carried more embarrassment than affection, I told him that success wasn't a family competition, and that if he wanted a relationship with me, it would have to begin with seeing me as a person rather than as the disappointing younger sister standing behind his achievements. Months later, Northstar signed a completely different partnership with a national housing organization, and I was invited to speak at a conference where hundreds of entrepreneurs listened, as I explained that the hardest part of building something wasn't surviving rejection from strangers, but learning to stop chasing approval from people whose definition of success had never included you. I still loved my family in complicated ways, but I no longer needed their permission to be proud of myself, because the woman who once sat quietly at the edge of a celebration while everyone discussed her future had finally understood that sometimes the most powerful response to being underestimated is not revenge, but building a life so authentic that you no longer care who finally notices. Please subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends and family. We create entertaining and inspiring stories for our viewers, and your support helps us continue making great content for you.